Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're listening to Radio Islam International live from this, not so early morning, just gone 11:13 a.m. I trust, alhamdulillah, you are well and you are awake, listening to your favorite radio station, that is Radio Islam International, on this panel discussion early morning right here from our studios in Durban by the sea. You know, the World War II, right? World War II was called World War II for a reason. Mind you, it wasn't named from day one. The world only realized that they were really at a world war around about the early 1940s, a few years after it had already started, and the media started using the term of World War II around about 1941, 1942, and then to cover certain regions. Europe was regarded as war. For them, Europe was the world at that time. And then Asia got pulled in with the arrival of the Japanese fleet and various other Asian entities, the war in China, etc. But it was also referred to as World War II for a reason. That in some way or the other, it seems that everybody in the world, whether you were a South American, whether you were European, whether you were even living in Australia for that matter, you knew somebody or you were related to somebody that lost their lives, that lost property, that lost something dear to them in the course of this particular war. And every community seemed to have been in the same boat, unique in that particular regard, and here the South African Muslim community is no different. I'm referring to a particular incident which is the topic of our discussion this morning, that on the 23rd of November 1942, a ship called the SS Tilawa, now we are heading to the 80th anniversary, right? Remember that date, 23rd of November 1942, just a few weeks ago, or a few weeks away from it being the 80th year thus far. The SS Tilawa, transporting mostly Indian nationals, and when we say Indian nationals, we mean those who were Indian, probably by passport, but most likely residing in Africa, in East Africa in particular, all the way as far as South Africa, en route to Mombasa, Maputo, and Durban. Now, this ship was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine near the Seychelles Islands. One particular survivor writes, I was one of the passengers on board the Tilawa, reads the memoirs of a person called Chunilal Navsaria, survivor of the SS Tilawa. Navsaria, probably the name intends that he was of Gujarati origin. In his detailed account of the ship's journey from Bombay as it was called then, Mumbai today, the author provides the type of narration that allows us to piece together the demise of the Tilawa. He says that his journey began with a train culminating in Bombay. He goes to explain that the British India Steam Navigation Company, which managed transportation to East Africa at that time, normally had a fortnightly, once every 2 weeks, scheduled journey to that East Africa route. But because of the war, it was cut down to around 6 or 8 weeks, and as a result, people were cramming to get a seat on that on that ship goodbye. And as people would now come, they would have a choice of first, second, third class tickets. This particular young man here, deceased now, but at that time, of course, a young boy, he says, his mother greeted the folks who were in the berth, in the cabin next to where he was going to sleep. They turned out to be a newly married couple en route to Africa. He told them, to look after me as a kid, and then left the ship and she was gone. I suppose that was quite common in those days. You just tell the neighbors, whoever you see, that, look after my son and we'll meet whenever we'll meet. But, from a South African Muslim perspective, quite a number of very interesting names and many relatives who, of course, long gone deceased, were on board that ship. One, of course, being the late Maulana Qasim Sima, whose memoirs are also recorded. But you know what, getting into the discussion, especially with regards to, they say that shipwrecks don't really lie forever. Somehow the other, Allah Ta'ala's system that everything comes to the surface one day or the other, if not in this world, on the day of Qiyamah. Salvage operation. Can you imagine that? The ship went down with millions of pounds of, bullion, silver bullion, as well as who knows what else. And as of recently, a few years back, there's been a salvage operation underway and a current claim in court as to exactly who owns this bullion and the wealth from the bottom of the sea. Well, joining us this evening, or rather this morning, should I say, Brother Haroon Mahomed, who's been on this SS Tilawa journey. He's alive, of course. He's around. He wasn't on board the ship. for many years now. And Brother Ashraf Roomaney also joining us, talking to us about the latest developments and, of course, the upcoming milestone of 80 years. Let's start with Brother Haroon first. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Haroon Tar Mahomed.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and assalamu alaikum to all your listeners.
Uncle Haroon, Jazakumullah khairan for joining us all the way from Lodi, making yourself available. You know, Uncle Haroon, I'm sure this discussion here rekindles plenty of memories, not of course of you being on board, but the search and the investigations and the work that you have put in all over the year. Over the years rather? Why is this SS Tilawa still so significant to you and to the greater Muslim population, and I would say the Indian population of South Africa, and why should its memory never ever leave us?
Well, Maulana, firstly, Jazakallah for the opportunity to explain to the listeners what really has triggered this in my life. Is that about 25 years ago, some gentleman came to visit me when I was working, and he said to me that his father had passed away. So I expressed my condolences, and I said to him that, you know, my father actually survived 2 nights and 2 days on a raft in the middle of the ocean, but because it wasn't his time, Almighty didn't take him then, you know. So he asked me, he says, but what ship was this? I told him it was the SS Tilawa. So he says that was my father-in-law was involved in the rescue operation. And that triggered everything because his father-in-law gave me a whole lot of pictures, that very, very significant picture about the lifeboat sinking. If you look on our website, you'll see that it's very, very traumatic picture. And then after that, a newspaper article appeared in one of the Sunday papers in 2001, and ever since then I've made, well, steady progress. But in that, you know, our brother Ashraf Roomaney and Imran Bobat all became involved, and we've, alhamdulillah, we've made significant progress. And like that, some other people have also taken to this thing like this. Some people abroad that have now taken the journey forward. But significantly, you know, we were looking for the passenger list, and the passenger liners couldn't offer us any information as to who was on the ship. But after my newspaper article in 2001, with much surprise, I got a call from the Suleiman Nana family. And they said that we've got this thing here, which we've been holding on to for many years. But now that we've read your article, we realize that this is actually the passenger list of those that survived and those that didn't. So I'm sitting here with probably the only passenger list that exists now of you know, all the passengers as such. So alhamdulillah, this is we've made great strides in this regard. Yeah, so that's what triggered this whole thing. And then, you know, all the things that my father explained to us about what transpired and how he went through those 2 days. It was really traumatic because he lost his younger brother, who was 11 years old, and he lost his 2 brother-in-laws who had recently married. So, yeah, for us as a family, we lost 3 family people in that ship. So, yeah, that's why it's very dear to me. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that go through this thing. Ashraf and Imran both are very passionate about this.
Brother Ashraf, I mean, let's move on to you, Brother Ashraf Roomaney. Your interest, I mean, it's not every day that a person, will come across anybody talking about a particular shipwreck or anywhere for that matter. But, I mean, for you and for a person to be interested in the SS Tilawa or any event for that matter, I mean, there's, of course, a personal investment inside there or a personal interest. What was your interest in this SS Tilawa, campaign that has been going on for a long time now?
Assalamu alaikum, Maulana. Shukr for the opportunity. I really think it's important that we spend much more time on this tragedy. I'll tell you where my interest started. I was a little boy, and my mom and dad told me about the sinking of this ship called Tilawa, and I thought it was spelled with a D, only to discover much later it's actually spelled with a T. And I tried from a young age already to try and find information on this ship, only to, obviously, as I said, discover that I was using the incorrect spelling. And the reason why I was looking for this information on the ship is because my maternal grandparents and my aunts perished on board the ship. And if I look at the life my mom and my uncle had to, the life they led as a result of this tragedy, I thought it only fair that I put some effort into trying and deciphering the mystery as to why the Japanese would do what they did. My mom and my uncle were not the only people who suffered at the hands of this tragedy. You will still find, we still find people 5-10 years ago who found it difficult to speak about this tragedy because of the experiences that they had, either having lost loved ones, but even those who survived, in fact, more those who survived. Because remember, they were floating, they were clinging to flotilla for 2 days in the middle of the Indian Ocean, being attacked by barracudas, seeing people drowning around them. So the psychological impact on them and the life they had to lead as a result, living with this tragedy, not very little is spoken about or written about. So that's mostly where I started showing an interest in it. Obviously, later as I grew older, I grew very much interested in the history around why the ship was torpedoed and possible legal ramifications of the individuals or the governments who perpetrated this tragedy. It's a lot's been said about, the Japanese. That one should inquire from them the role they played in this tragedy, but not too many people are asking what role the British played, and more importantly, what role the Indian government played in why the Tilawa was sunk in the manner it was. So,
Brother Ashraf,
I can share a lot of information with you about my
Brother Ashraf, I've been hearing a lot of discussions about the SS Tilawa, reading many articles, especially the ones pinned up there on the SS Tilawa website. And this is not, of course, the first time that this discussion is taking place. But I think that 80 years on, this particular topic, if I may follow up on that, that discussion that we're having right now, the intent of governments. I mean, everybody on board by way of a passenger on that ship was basically an innocent person, not involved in the war in any possible way. They were middle to lower, and a few, upper class, wealthier, Indians of African origin or whose destination was Africa on board, but not involved in this war in any possible way. And for a ship to be targeted and torpedoed twice, I mean, that's an important thing, right? The Japanese came, knocked it off once, and then about a few minutes or half an hour later, all survivors claim a second sound, showing showing that the Japanese had intent. They didn't just simply, say that, oh, you know what, we made a mistake, let's move on from here. It's a civilian craft. But for some reason, they were intent on destroying this, this passenger liner, which they, with the intelligence, definitely knew that this here was a passenger liner. It wasn't a military vessel in any possible way. And then the lack of protection afforded by the British Navy at that point in time, noting that they are going through very dangerous waters at that point in history. I mean, these are important questions that you raise, Brother Ashraf, which nobody is asking. In your personal journey, have you been able to uncover any of these answers, or at least some plausible theories as to why the ship was targeted in the first place?
Well, at first I thought it was an act of war, an act of piracy, really, because there was a lot of talk about Japanese wanting the bullion on board the ship, and this is all anecdotal. They were in contact with Captain Robertson, and Robertson wouldn't give up his ship, and because he wouldn't give up his ship, they fired the second torpedo and sunk it. And so I always thought that was a kind of act of piracy on behalf of the Japanese. But later on, as I researched more and more, I discovered that perhaps the Tilawa was not being used as a passenger liner. It could have been used as a merchant cruiser. Albeit we're not sure if it was registered as a merchant cruiser, because if it was, they should have first of all disclosed it to the passengers so that they knew what the class of that ship was. And if it's a merchant cruiser, it can be used in the war effort. There are a lot of people have said they've seen military equipment on board, and definitely those who perished and survived were ranking military personnel in the British Army. Recently, Haroon sent me a very interesting document, and I will just read to you briefly what this document or inquired at the time when news came through that a U-boat had sunk the SS Tilawa. This is on the 24th of November 1942, and the Commodore of the Royal Indian Navy asked for detail of the crew and passengers from the ship's agents, it was McKinnon Mackenzie at the time. And the detail they were more interested in was what military personnel were on board. Who were the members of the British Army that was on board the ship? And so if it was used as a merchant cruiser, then effectively the Tilawa became fair game to the Japanese. And were the passengers given an opportunity to say, well, I'm not going to board the ship if I know the ship will be fair game to the Japanese? There's an account from Captain Robinson where he first thought he struck a mine. Now, if you're sailing through waters that are mined, or if you think you're sailing through waters that are mined, then surely your passengers should be told that, look, there's a potential we can strike a mine here. And then I'll also read to you briefly. I'm not sure how much time we have, Maulana, but I had a person helping me with research who lived in the UK at the time, and I'll read briefly what she tells me in the email. I came across some legislation by the Indian government, ordering these merchant ships to allow British soldiers on board their vessels and to provide bed and food for them. I also found a contact to that effect with BI. So BI was the British Indian Steamship Company or something to that nature. I forget the exact name, but they own the ship. So the Indian government, well, I mean, if you could call them a government at the time, remember the Brits were still in charge of this, or still colonized India at the time. But the Indian government, or whatever they will, however you can describe them at the time, may have been complicit in this, and so were the British. So all of these questions remain unanswered, and 80 years later, people are still reluctant to give you answers. I write to Lloyd's of London. I ask them, look, give me the history as to who paid, who received the insurance payout. And 80 years later, they're still hiding behind client confidentiality. So, lots of answers, Maulana, and lots of questions, sorry, very little answers.
Brother Ashraf, we'll come back to you in a while, and I'm going to specifically talk to you, inshallah, and pick your brain with regards to the salvage operation. And this is more a recent, type of a development that has now taken place. But before that, Brother Haroon, many people don't know of this ship, the SS Tilawa, and in the last few years, no doubt, some awareness has been made, and that awareness has been mainly connected with certain personalities on board, the ship itself, like Hazrat Maulana Qasim Sema, rahmatullah alayhi, who passed away a few years ago, but he was a young man returning from India from his studies, at that point in time. And there were others, prominent families in Durban, not just Muslims, but also, from the Hindu community as well, that had family members or people on board that particular ship. The legacy of those who survived as well as those who passed away on board. I mean, how has that memory, how has that legacy been preserved over, especially the last few years? Get-togethers, commemoration. I know there's one planned recently, or is it about in a few weeks' time in Bombay or Mumbai with the last survivor left, who will be hopefully brought to that particular commemoration. But how are these memories being rekindled, re-established, and as a form of education that, this is what our ancestors and forefathers went through?
Well, this has been the intention all along, is to bring people to understand that, their family members could have been on this list, and hence we've been distributing the passenger list. We've been advertising for people to visit our website, and occasionally, every now and then, we get people inquiring from us to say that, can you give us more information? We can't find the name of our family person on the list, and then we help them to this thing, because some of the names are not spelled correctly, and we've helped quite a few people to find the family members' names on the list. There are several other people that are have given quite a bit of input in this matter and assisted us in bringing lots of the information to the fore. It's people like Ibrahim Rendry family. Mr. Brother Yunus Rendry's father was one of the people that was on the ship. And there's a picture of him. That's the only picture of people on the HMS Birmingham. That is the vessel, that's the ship that went to rescue the people. It's his picture is on the ship. Those kind of pieces of information we've made available, and we've gained a lot of information from Mr. Tunilal Nafsaria, because he had done quite a bit of research in this regard. And then obviously I interviewed Maulana Qasim Sema as well. And he told me in no uncertain terms that really that there was military vehicles on deck, They were all covered with canvases and things like that. So, my father also told me that there was definitely military vehicles on ship. But I mean, at that stage, going down to see what was the situation, it might have been a very difficult thing. Mr. Len Thomas, who was on the HMS Birmingham, wrote to me at the time when he gave me the information. He said to me that on a note, he wrote to his son-in-law to say that please explain to Haroon that we had to demarcate that area properly, because there were 60 tons of silver. At that time already they knew, when the ship went down, they knew there were 60 tons of silver on board. But what else, we don't know. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. But yes, we've had several other families. There's the Bulla Chita family, the New Era printers, people. There's some, right now I can't remember all the people, but your uncle's wife's uncle was also on the Baila family. So we've got lots of people, and I lived with the Bailas for 2 years in 1971. We never discussed this. We never spoke about it. Only in 2001, 30 years later, did we realize that we had a family that was on the ship. So yeah, we're trying our best. Unfortunately, we won't be able to travel to India. We're trying to go, but it might be a good thing to participate in this. But really speaking, we need to perhaps think of maybe doing something on our own here, to commemorate this occasion. It's sometimes thinking about it, you think what was going through my father's mind, when this particular incident took place, because it's quite traumatic. Between him and his brother, they had one life jacket. And his younger brother, who was a very good swimmer, insisted that my father should wear the life jacket, and then they'll hold each other. But when they got into the lifeboat, they lost each other. Because the lifeboat came loose, and they toppled into the water. So basically, it was very traumatic. And for my father, he wouldn't speak about it too much. The little that he told us, we tried to remember. And like that, I think a lot of people don't talk about it or didn't talk about it. I'm quite sure that Ashraf has the same story to say, and so does Imran, and so does so many other people that were on this vessel.
Uncle Haroon, you of course raised the issue of the military vehicles, on board. Of course, that is a report of survivors, as well as the bullion, which we know by now for sure that was on board because of the recent salvage operations, and that the ship itself being used for civilian as well as possible military and economic operations as well. We have about 10 minutes or so. Brother Ashraf, I want to highlight a more recent development which I've been alluding to for some time now, and that is the recent salvage operations. Now, the SS Tilawa is not unique to salvage operations that have taken place 70 or 80 years thereafter. We've had a number of very famous names in the shipping world that have also been the subject of salvage operations and the rules and the legalities that apply with it. But the SS Tilawa, has had some court as well as some media attention in the last few years. Talk to us about those salvage operations and how you've got individuals who are interested in the silver bullion and whatever wealth may be recovered from the remains of the Tilawa.
So the history to the silver bullion is as follows. The then South African government in its form, then I think they were called the Union or something, the Union of South Africa or something of that nature. They had purchased this more than 2,500 silver bullion bars for minting of coins. So there was what the British court concluded a commercial transaction where the South African government purchased the silver bullion and were intending to transport it down to Durban with the intention of making silver coins. The bullion in the South African government's eyes is of a sovereign nature. So it's a very technical the argument they try to make. They try to make this was not a commercial transaction. This was a sovereign transaction, a transaction that is protected by international laws protecting sovereignty. And the British court came to a different conclusion. They concluded that the transaction was of a commercial nature, and because of that, Argentum, who salvaged the silver bullion, are entitled to some kind of remuneration. And we're not sure. Nowhere has it been recorded what the value at today's prices are of the silver bullion and how much Argentum should be remunerated or rewarded for the effort. But as things stand right now, and South Africa has lost on the field as well, if they want to get that silver bullion back, they'd have to pay Argentum for their efforts. I'm not happy with what Argentum did. They did it clandestinely. It only came to light because they forced by legislation to disclose what they salvaged. And of course, there's the issue of the disturbance of a war grave. But at the same time, I'm in awe of what they achieved, because when I wrote to as far back as 2004 to the British Department of Transport, Defence and Civil Contingency Planning Department, they had told me, I'd asked them about the possibility of salvaging the ship or the cargo of the ship, and he said the department has had no approaches regarding the potential salvage operation, but this is perhaps not surprising in view of the limited commercial return. So nobody, as far back as 2004, nobody thought it was commercially viable. Clearly Argentum did. And also, it was not physically possible. So if you look at the average depth of the Indian Ocean, it's about 4 kilometers. The average depth is about 4 kilometers deep. The deepest point, which is just off Java, is about 7.5 kilometers deep. Now, if you divers tell me that to get to that depth of the ocean, you need pretty fancy kit. And at that time, as far back as 2004, for example, there was no. They didn't have the technology to get to that depth, and definitely not to salvage nearly 2,400 bars of silver. So it's commendable what Argentum did from a technology point of view, but it's very questionable the morality of what they did.
Brother Ashraf, as a relation to the recompensation, I mean, have the survivors previously and the family of the survivors, I mean, y'all who are we talking to right now by way of children or grandchildren, have they pursued the avenue of seeking any form of financial repatriation? I mean, other countries have done so. Other communities have done so. You've had people seeking repatriation from the governments of Germany, the governments of Italy, against Japan, or Australian survivors of the Japanese genocide of World War II have in fact sought, I don't know how successful everybody was, but there has been the motion to seek financial recompensation and repatriations from certain governments. Has this ever been pursued in the case of the Tilawa, if not from the Japanese government, but at least some sort of a understanding that there was a major loss by a vessel that was supposed to be protected by the British government at that point in time, and a passenger liner was downed. I don't know if you understand the angle of my questioning here, but has that ever been approached, Brother Ashraf?
Okay, well, for me personally, I gave a commitment to my mom that I wouldn't pursue any financial reward either for her or for myself for doing this. This needs to be well, can't call it a labor of love because it's quite a tragedy, but I never ever wanted, and I don't think I'll ever want to pursue this for financial reward. If you're asking me from a legal perspective, there are lots of angles that survivors can take. They can try and file a class action lawsuit. They can rely on the fact that the war grave has been disturbed, so there should be some kind of compensation. There's the Protection of Military Remains Act, it's the British Act, an Act of Parliament in the UK that can enforce that. There's also their own statute which allows you to take issue with somebody disturbing a war grave. Haroon and I have spoken about this a few times. I mean, we don't really want to do this for commercial reasons, Maulana. I don't want to be distracted by being driven by the money. But perhaps others may be interested, and if they are, I'm willing to assist. But me personally, I made a commitment to my mom, and I don't want to deviate from that.
I think,
we have a minute or two left.
Our brother Imran Bobat did. There is a letter somewhere where his father has written to the Indian government, where I think they turned down this thing on the basis that it was wartime. If I'm not mistaken, am I right? In Ashraf? Yes,
that is correct. They had responded by saying, look, it's war, it's during wartime, and they won't be making, there's no opportunity for compensation for pecuniary loss or any other loss at the time. I mean, I had, many years ago, I had a University of Cape Town a professor look at this whole tragedy for me, and he gave me a very long report, only to conclude that all's fair in love and war. So
you accept it as the fate it is. Yes.
Yeah. Look, I'm not saying somebody should be held accountable. And perhaps if in my mom's lifetime I can just get an apology from somebody, then I would have achieved my objective. I do think somebody needs to account. I think we deserve answers. It's a mystery why the Japanese would target a passenger liner, fire one torpedo, wait 1 hour later, and deliver the coup de grace 1 hour later. I mean, it's a mystery. If you're in war and you want to kill off the enemy, you kill off one time and move on. Why wait 1 hour and fire a second torpedo? So all of these answers are like knowing answers that everybody really needs to find. If it means that we require funding or money to find these answers, I don't want to be distracted by that.
Brother Haroon and Brother Ashraf, we are at the conclusion, we are at the end, of course, of our discussion this evening, and I'm sure one that I would like to really maybe continue, especially after the meet, or hopefully, the end of the month, wherein this sort of reunion of the memory of the Tilawa is going to take place in Mumbai, and maybe we can, cross over live, or maybe get some statement out there. Granted, the sole survivor, I believe there's just one survivor, and he's of course quite elderly at this point in time, and whether he comes to the event or not is still questionable, but nonetheless, those that do gather in memory of their loved ones and their friends or whoever was on board, it'll be interesting to get a global perspective from them, because after all, it was an international community, wasn't it? The survivors were taken back to India. Many of them were Indian origins and might have continued to live out their lives in their country of origin itself. And maybe after this reunion, that would be a good time to actually pursue and follow up what are their feelings, what are their emotions regarding the sinking of the SS Tilawa. But Brother Haroon Tar Mahomed, Jazakumullah khairan for joining us on Radio Islam International, and talking to us about this very passionate topic of yours.
Maulana, can I just ask you for a favor? Is that we have the passenger list, and I think I have sent it to you. But if the listeners can be asked to at least share the website details of the passenger list details with people that they know, especially in places like India, because the people predominantly on this list were from Gujarat and Maharashtra provinces. So the thing is that, we'd like to hear from people that, whose names appear on this. I mean, families of people whose names. And if there are any survivors, maybe we can still find some survivors. The survivors would be in the age over 80, obviously. And those that will remember will be obviously the gentleman, the one that's alive, is 83 years old. He cannot remember anything. It will be of great benefit. We'd like to put, a lot of the pieces together as such. So we'd like you to please, if you can, ask your listeners just to share this information with people, and between themselves, and basically to send it out to India and wherever, internationally as well, because our communities are all over the world now.
And that website, of course, would be the www.sstilawa.com. That would be the website wherein they do have information there, how to contact and, those responsible to hopefully update the list or any information that you do want to know latest or past about the sinking itself, the sstilawa.com. Brother Ashraf Roomaney, shukran jazakumullah khairan for joining us and for your insights and for your time.
Shukran, Maulana. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And that's our wrap for this evening. I trust it's been an interesting conversation. We always wanted to do this one, and I thought I'll leave it for, the 80th milestone or anniversary that's coming up at the end of November. And inshallah, we'll try and get snippets of information as they come around. And who knows, maybe the next generation of those pursuing the topic itself will have much more, information regarding reason and intent and why, and many of those questions that remain unanswered even up to today.